13, 14 students were there. Yes.
I think he will join soon. The
Acha,
students
they
will,
will join. And
yes.
today again we do find that the 13, not more than 13 students are here. The reason I don't know why they are not interested in these lectures.
Yeah.
Now these lectures are, I think this is interaction, a kind of interaction with the students, because a resource person is supposed to speak for an hour, and the students are given half an hour to ask the questions, to give suggestions, and if they have some queries, then to ask. Yesterday, I started my talk with Einstein's very famous quotation by Einstein that yesterday, if they were present, then they might they know that how the Einstein have asked his fellow scientists and fellow men to ask question. Asking question is very important, which aid to knowledge and information. But yesterday, very few question, one question asked by one research scholar from Delhi University. So therefore, if you are attending this workshop, attending the lecture, then have a pen and copy and write down some of the points. Some of the points you will be somewhere you will be asked in anywhere in interview, if you are going to take interview for your lecturership or any in any field of employment. So therefore, be attentive, be serious, try to listen the experts, resource person, and try to ask question, because it's enhanced your personality as your knowledge. And also at the same time, it also give inputs to the resource person to, or encourage the resource person to study more and more, be prepared more for any this kind of lectures. Anyhow, very few. Today, this is a quite great opportunity for me, a great pleasure for me to interact with you. Some of them I don't know, though they are in department. Okay, what is their field of expertise and what is their area of interest? Today I will speak, interact with you on a very interesting topic. Interesting in the sense that this is the recent development when the historians are working on journalism, newspapers. Now they try to use press reportings as the source of history writing. These days, the press reportings are considered as the major source of historical evidence. They are believed to be reliable as the press correspondent are generally eyewitness. You can understand in a better way when we discuss, when we talk, when we study about the revolt of 1857. Then many journalists who have reported on the revolt of 1857, but I point out to Karl Marx, who was the correspondent of New York Daily Tribune. He wrote extensively on the British colonialism in India, its economic policies, its industrial policies, agricultural policies. At the same time, when the revolt of 1857 started, then he reported keenly the incident, the event, the leadership, the causes, the consequences, the nature, the kind of participation of the people, the debate around the nature, and the mentality of the people, the leadership, the technology that was used by the rebels on the one hand and the British on the other hand, crime and cruelties, violation of human rights, all these were reported by many journalists of the world, including India. Karl Marx was one of the prominent figures. and one of in India, one of it was editor of Delhi Urdu Akhbar, that is Maulvi Muhammad Bakar, and many more. So therefore, the reportings of the newspapers are very important source of history. Most useful kind of historical material. The information that that historians collect from the newspapers, because it is considered the most reliable. Now, a few words on the journalism. Journalism means communication of information through writings in periodicals and newspapers. This is a simple definition of journalism. Journalism means writing for newspapers to educate people, to inform people, and instruct the general masses what is happening, to make them aware about what is the social situation, what is the political situation, how economy is growing, how agriculture is improving. These are the many more areas, very wide and vast, dealing with every aspect of society, every aspect of human life. The journalist dealt with this. The press greatly help in formulation of public opinion. Press is called the fourth estate. You know, three organs of the government, that is legislature, that is executive, and judiciary, and these are called three estates of the government. And now the press is so important. Journalism is so important. It is so relevant to the society to make or to shape, to mold the public opinion in favor of the government or against the government. The newspapers or the journalism is so important, so relevant, that is, it is called, the press is called the fourth estate. From this perspective, from this, the newspapers or the press is very, very important. And this is recent development. Then historians are taking the reportings of the newspapers as a source of history writing. Yesterday, I told about the invention of the printing press. Yesterday, I also talked about the beginning of the press in the world and in India. How it were the Europeans credited for the introduction, Portuguese particularly speaking, for the invention, for bringing this printing press in India. It were the English who was credited for publishing the first newspaper, that is the Hickey's Gazette, Bengal Gazette. In other way, it was called Calcutta General Advertiser. This was the first newspaper. And this is the beginning, humble beginning of press in India. And from the very beginning, when an Englishman, he was Dutch. He was Dutch. His name was William Bold. He tried to publish a newspaper. He got permission from the British East India Company to publish a newspaper. And he published a newspaper exposing the corruption that was involved, that was there in the East India Company working in India at various levels. This infuriated the British authorities in India. Even Warren Hastings was criticized. I mean, not Lord Hastings, it was Hastings governor at that time. Now he was arrested. He paid a heavy price. He was deported to England. Then there was another man after William Bowles. And his effort too was frustrated by the British authorities. But the beginning was there. Now the people, many more people from England, and later on it were the Indians started coming with the newspapers. Sometime earlier it was in English. Later on it was vernacular vernacular languages. Now these, if you will go through the rules and regulation that is formulated after Hickey's Gazette, you will find the British were not in favor of a free press. East India Company's administration was not in favor of free press because they were afraid, they had apprehension that it will expose their modus operandi, their ill intention, their corruption in the particularly in the procurement department, military department, and many more, the land revenue department, commercial department, where they indulge into corruption. Therefore, whenever an Englishman or any European try to think about publishing newspaper, or he started or publish a newspaper, then the British East India Company's official imposed fines, license were cancelled, press was seized, a large number of, we will find the regulations were made, ordinances were passed, now there was restriction was imposed, even editors were supposed to hand over all the material which was supposed to be published to British authorities. It was only on their permission the newspaper was published, the material was published. It was only during the William Bantings and Charles Metcalfe the press got some liberty to publish the newspapers, though there were censorship there. That is why Charles Metcalfe was known as the liberator of the press. So these are the regulations. These regulations, if you will go through, you will find how they were apprehensive of the freedom of the press, of free press, because there were malpractices, there were corruption, there were brutalities, there were crime and criminality, there were police atrocities, and they did not want it to be exposed to the public and exposed to the British people, what is happening in India. Now, coming to we can divide this into three parts. First is the coming of the Europeans. Second is the establishment of the British rule. And third is the resistance movement. And fourth is the finally how the press, the indigenous press, played a crucial role, how the native press played a crucial role in making India free, providing liberty, providing independence to the countrymen. With the four aspects. First of all, we will deal with this this independence of the establishment of the British rule. How the British rule was established in India, how the Europeans came. First of all, if you remember, it was in 1600, 30th December 1600, Queen Elizabeth issued a charter to the East India Company to carry trade with this part of the world. With this charter, they started carrying trade with this part of the world. They sent many diplomatic missions to the Mughal courts to get extra concessions. Mughals were very powerful. They confined their activities to carry trade, and only trade. And after the disintegration of the Mughal Empire, the British realized, most of the Europeans realized, who came to India to carry trade with this part of the world, they realized that now time has come. We can extend our area of operation, trade operation. And now they extended trade. And now they got, by virtue of this trade, they got huge profit. And now with this profit, they were intoxicated. They got an idea to extend more and more, to expand more and more their trades so that they could get extra benefits. And for your knowledge, they got 100% 200%, 300% in some of the cases, 400% profit out of this trade. This lured them. This lucrative trade, they attracted, and they started thinking of monopolization. And this monopolization, they monopolized the trade. With this monopoly trade, they started ousting other rival European powers. Portuguese, Dutch, Spaniards. Finally, there were commercial rivalry between France and England, which is known as Anglo-French rivalry, which is you might have studied in Carnatic Wars, 3 Carnatic Wars. Finally, French were defeated in Battle of Vandivers 1760, and finally the British got an upper hand in India. They monopolized the trade, and by this time, 1760, they developed territorial interest. Territorial interest meaning by monopoly, they were getting huge margin of profit. They thought that if territory will come under their control, then their profit would be multiplied. With this, they have territorial designs, and these territorial designs resulted into the imperialist design. This imperialist design encouraged them to conquer territory in India. With this, they went for conquest of Bengal. The historian P.J. Marshall is of the opinion that the conquest of Bengal and rest of India was neither planned nor directed by the British government. What J.R. Seeley called, it was accidental. It was not planned. But if we will study the different phases of the imperialism and the colonialism in India, which historians have divided into 3 phases and 3 periods, then you will find yourself that how the British adopted or transformed their policies to make India subservient, to bring Indian territories under their control. How the interest in trade was transformed into monopoly trade, and how this monopoly trade was transformed in idea of the territorial control, and how this idea of territorial control was finally transformed into the idea of conquest. And in this way, we do find the idea of conquest was not without plan. No doubt, they might have come without planning to conquer India. But with the passage of time, with the getting huge profit, now they developed their dream and aspiration for that conquest of India. And the result and the consequent was the Battle of Plassey. It was described by historian, it was not a war. It was a transaction that British entered into some of the leading administrators of Siraj-ud-Daula's administration, some of the businessmen, tycoons, bankers, Jagat Seth, Omichand, Mir Jafar, and now the deal was made, striked, and in the battle they remained silent, neutral. Siraj-ud-Daula was defeated. This is the beginning of the conquest of India, and by reaching 1856, with the annexation of Awadh, the whole country was at their disposal. They became the paramount power. So this is the beginning. When Siraj-ud-Daula, on the death of Siraj-ud-Daula, and realizing the consequence, one of the contemporary poet, Ram Narayan Mausam, sarcastically wrote that Ghazala tum to waqif ho, kaho Majnun ke marne ki, दीवाना मर गया आखिर को वीराने पे क्या गुजरी. Meaning by Siraj-ud-Daula was killed. लेकिन what had happened to the people? people of Bengal, how they paid the price, how Bengal was plundered, which is known as Plassey plunder. The wealth that was looted from Bengal, that constituted a major source of investment. Now the earlier British used to bring bullion to purchase the Indian goods. And after 1764, Battle of Buxar, 1765, after getting Diwani right, that is the right to collect land revenue of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha, no longer they need to bring bullion. They generated, they created the resources through Plassey plunder, through Diwani right, and now out of this source created, generated within the country, within Bengal, now it was being used for purchase of the Indian goods, which is known as investment. Now, India, a very new phenomenon, a very strange phenomenon started. That is the drain of wealth from India to England. Earlier, it was England, where parliamentarians criticized for the East India Company's policy for taking the wealth from England to India. Now the situation reversed. And now this wealth was being taken. So this is the, you can say this is the first and foremost important issue, the transfer of the wealth, for which India was not getting any adequate return. Now the poets, the writers and journalists, जो जर्नलिज्म अब बाद में आता है, लेकिन from the sources, from the literature, they collected the information कि how the literateurs, how the writers reacted to the British East India Company's policy, the policy of conquest. Now, one poet, it is Mushafi, who talked about the drain of wealth in these words, in a couplet, who got martyrdom during the revolt of 1857 में वो शहीद भी हो गया, उसका नाम मुसहफी है। वो कहता है कि हिंदुस्तान की दौलत वो हशमत जो कुछ कभी थी, काफिर फिरंगियों ने बातदबीर खींच ली। What is his opinion? His opinion was कि हिंदुस्तान की जो दौलत थी, हिंदुस्तान की जो अजमत थी, हिंदुस्तान की जो शान शौकत थी, उसको काफिर फिरंगियों ने अपनी तदबीर से लूट लिया और यहां से उठा करके इंग्लैंड ले गए। This poet, who used to write poems in the newspapers, in the magazines, in the journals, available magazine, it was now very limited, उसमें उसने वो नज्म लिखी थी पूरी, जहां हमें ड्रेन ऑफ वेल्थ के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन मिलती है। Now the Urdu 1822, this was the beginning, this was the 29th January 1822, first Urdu newspaper was published. This was the humble beginning of the Urdu press in India. Its impact, so far as its impact is concerned, it was very little impact, but it was the beginning. Now later on, another man who entered into scene after the death of his brother Sayyid Ahmad, Sayyid Muhammad, it was Sayyid Ahmad, who later became Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, known popularly as Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan. His brother died, who used to edit a newspaper, Sayyidul Akhbar. Sir Sayyid started editing that. I'm not going into the details. So now it was Sir Sayyid who shaped, who gave a new direction, who gave a new theme, who उसके अखबार और जर्नलिज्म, उर्दू जर्नलिज्म की एक दशा और दिशा को निर्धारित किया सर सैयद अहमद खान ने। This was the great contribution of Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, along with many other contributions in the field of journalism. दशा और दिशा निर्धारित किया सर सैयद अहमद खान ने while writing, getting experience in writing articles in Sayyidul Akhbar. Afterwards, we do find by reaching 1840, Urdu press by that time developed. editors become courageous, become started writing about the plight of the country. Either it was the social, either it was the political deprivation, it was the economic dislocation, all they started talking about this writing in the newspapers. It is also criticized by some scholars that the circulation of the newspaper was very limited. What impact it left upon the mind of the people? How you can say that this was a powerful instrument to mobilize the people, to shape and mold the opinion of the public, that is the public formulation of public opinion? Yes, it is right. Initially, we do find that the circulation, publication of newspaper was limited. Very few readers. Major newspapers were purchased by bulk purchase by the British government, British officials. But with the passage of time, people started the habit of reading newspapers, that too owned works. Lekin another very important development that had taken place, the journalists started writing about or opposing the British government, criticizing British policy, and they caught the true impulse of the Indians' psyche and mentality, because Indians were very critical of that, their policies. Either it was economic policy, either it was their financial policy, monetary policy, agrarian policy, commercial policy, political policy, social, and religion. Of course, by that time, they started intervening. By 1840, they started intervening, actively intervening in the religious affairs of different sections of the Indian society. That created resentment among the Indians. That was the beginning, how the people started attracting towards newspapers and newspaper readings. So in this context, we will say that because of the British policies putting restriction on the newspapers, because of exposing the British policies, highlighting the British policies, some of the Indians attracted towards newspapers. Is still question being asked, question पूछा जाता है कि भाई 1000, 500, 300, 200, this was the circulation of the newspapers. So here I'll put you before a question. Today, the population of India is this much. Circulate all the newspapers, if you will calculate, you will find it was again very limited circulation. Though we have opportunity to have electronic media, social media, but at that time there was no electronic media, only print media was available. So how this created an impact? So answer is that there was during that period, if you will believe Bipin Chandra, how the Bipin Chandra tried to explain the impact of the press, that he was of the opinion that the newspaper, this journalism, was basically, he tried to explain the impact of journalism, print media, in terms of Charpai movement. What is Charpai movement? Charpai movement is that during that period, there was one newspaper, people sitting on a charpai, one person was reading it out, and other 10 or 5 or 6 people were listening. And this was the idea, or any information was being transmitted from the listeners to others. So how this movement, the journalistic movement, how the journalism around the charpai now carried out before the audience, before the masses, how Bipin Chandra further explains the impact. Now these journalists were basically guided by an idea, oppose and oppose and oppose. Oppose the British government, people will come to, people will listen, people will read, people around around Charpai, they will come. The man who purchased a newspaper come. Today you will find how in the villages, people are not purchasing the newspapers. They simply went to a chaikhana. वहाँ चाय के ढाबे पे एक अखबार हो जाता है, दैनिक जागरण मिल गया, अमर उजाला मिल गया, और उसको कम से कम सुबह से लेकर शाम तक एटलीस्ट 20-30 पीपल पढ़ते हैं. तो नाउ हाउ द आइडिया वाज बीइंग ट्रांसमिटेड थ्रू दिस. So during that period, in this way, the newspapers have a very powerful impact upon the people. That is why the newspapers are being described. Newspaper is the lifeblood of democracy, and it communication between the government and governed. This is a medium between government and governed. It bridges the gulf between the public and the government. So this is how the importance of the newspapers was being realized, and most important, effective and extensive, popular and cheapest method of molding public opinion during that day. Because during that period, there was no electronic media, no other media, only print media. In this context, we can say that Urdu press, prominently, it was more senior than Hindi journalism. Hindi journalism came later on in 1829, that is Martan Utan. Because Hindus, upper class Hindus used to read Urdu. They know Farsi and Urdu. That is the reason why Raja Ram Mohan Rai, when he started his socio-religious reform movement, when he started his movement or campaign against the Sati, now he started publishing a newspaper that is in Bengali, that is Sambat Kamudi, another is Miratul Akhbar, that is in Persian, because to cater the need of the Persian knowing people, to make them aware about this. Now the Urdu press, after 1840, after passing out from the formative phase, now when it entered into, to say 1840, 43, there was many more newspapers coming out. And the most important and the major role that was played by the press, or Urdu press particularly, that was the spreading discontent and politics of the protest, and making ground for the protest, for the resistance, for making people aware how they were politically robbed, how economically they were exploited, how socially they were excluded, and how culturally their culture was destroyed by the alien rulers. So spreading discontent, politics of protest, these newspapers generally highlighted inequality, injustice, discrimination, humiliation, misbehavior, ill treatment, contempt, in a very craftily manner, so that Indians who belongs to whatever section, which section, hardly matters, but they felt these humiliations, these injustices. If injustice, inequality was so rampant in the society that people got convinced, when the writers or the journalists started writing how this imperialist force or imperialist power playing a double role, giving all kinds of rights, equality, liberty, justice, freedom, parliamentary system of the government, democracy, representative institution in their own country. But the same institution, the same government is depriving Indians politically, socially, economically, culturally. So this was how the people attracted the newspapers or the journalism. And they started reading, not all, some people read it out, and now the message was spread or transmitted through this. Now one day, a day come when the press, particularly some of the Urdu newspapers, which I'll explain, for example, Delhi Urdu Akhbar. This is a pioneer. Even before that, Tilism was there. Even Sadekul Akhbar was there. Now, what the editor of this newspaper did, he realized, first of all, studied the impulse. आज भी जो मीडिया है, प्रिंट मीडिया हो, सोशल मीडिया हो, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया हो, वो एक बाजार में सर्वे करता है, वो इंसान की, लोगों की साइकोलॉजी क्या है, वो किस चीज को चाहते हैं, क्या मटेरियल चाहिए उनको, क्या कंटेंट चाहिए, उसी कंटेंट पे वो ज्यादातर हाईलाइट करते हैं. तो सिमिलरली द एडिटर ऑफ दिस न्यूज़पेपर दिल्ली उर्दू अखबार मौलाना मौलवी मोहम्मद बाकर ने एक पॉलिसी बनाया. पॉलिसी क्या था? प्रोटेस्ट आइडियोलॉजी. प्रोटेस्ट आइडियोलॉजी पे अगर लिखा जाए और लोगों को अंग्रेजों के खिलाफ, चूंकि अंग्रेजों के खिलाफ सबके जहन में बात थी, अगर एक किसान था तो किसान was suffering, he was exploited, he was oppressed, suppressed just after 1793. This was the beginning of implementation of permanent settlement. How the peasantry was being exploited. For centuries and centuries, they were enjoying the customary rights, the traditional rights, ownership right, proprietary right on the land. एक झटके में अंग्रेजों ने उसको खत्म किया by introducing permanent settlement, and they were deprived of their customary right, property right. So they have grievances in their mind. Rayatwari settlement was introduced to bring improvement in the life of the peasantry, but their objective to get maximum land revenue as a tax, as a rent, was fulfilled, but the lot of the peasantry was never fulfilled, deteriorated and deteriorated because of the high rate of taxation, because of the oppressive system of collection, because of the arbitrary fixation of the land revenue at the very high rate. You know sunset theory, आप जानते होंगे इसके बारे में सब. तो किसानों के यहाँ भी कहीं ना कहीं grievances थे. So now these peasants revolted from time to time against the British. Against the British. We have evidences how the peasantry revolted. In this context, I will give you two examples. Number one is the Frizy movement. Frizy movement, how they revolted against the British authority. It was sheer exploitation of the peasantry that forced them to revolt against the British. There was Wahhabi movement. There were so many issues, but agrarian issue was there, like Frizy movement. It started as agrarian movement. Later on, it is assumed a political character and religious character. What a movement which is started as agrarian movement now soon assumed the character of political character. It assumed the political character. So in this, Urdu newspaper also highlighted their issues, agrarian issues. And in this context, you know, one of the famous Urdu newspaper, that is Zamindar, very vocal of that, of the British policy, of their various programs and policies. Zamindar, its editor was Maulvi Zafar Ali Khan, Maulana Zafar Ali Khan. It supported the peasantry, their issues of exploitation, addressed, wrote very revolutionary articles, pamphlets, published pamphlets, इश्तेहार, जो कुछ भी था उस वक्त जो किसानों के हक में था वो लिख रहे थे. He criticized the students and their guardians who, in pursuit of their education and hope for getting employed in the government services at a time when country needs the support of the students and youth of the country. मौलाना जफर अली खान ने स्टूडेंट्स को एड्रेस करते हुए एक मजमून लिखा. इट वाज वेरी इन्फ्लेमेटरी, इट वाज वेरी रेडिकल. उस वक्त उन्होंने क्या कहा, गार्जियन से और स्टूडेंट से कहा कि नाउ दिस इज द टाइम टू कम एंड ज्वाइन your countrymen, your brethren, in their fighting against the British imperialism, in their revolt, in their protest, in their resistance against the British colonialism. He gave the example. बहुत interesting चीज है. It is very interesting. He gave the example. See, when England and Germany involved in war, all the students of Oxford and Cambridge, along with teachers, left the university for the cause of their country. In Germany, the students abandoned their teaching and learning. So the teachers, and they joined the country. So the students of England, Oxford and Cambridge. In Egypt, he gave another example. In Egypt, what had happened? How the student of Jamia Azhar, Al-Azhar University, when there was a war, when there was a crisis, the students came forward and they supported their country. So in these lines, Maulana Zafar Ali Khan, in his newspapers, try to mobilize the people, try to convince the people to come forward and to fight against the British imperialism. That is how the protest ideology work. And again, we do find from time to time these newspapers were banned for their writings, for their formulating public opinions. Now, folklores were also published. Hadas were published. Hadas, a local song in Rajasthan, when the peasant movement grew stronger and stronger, Bijolia movement in Rajasthan. So these newspapers cited the efforts, the protest, the resistance. Similarly, we do find when the British started interfering in the affairs of the religion in the name of socio-religious reform, though Raja Ram Mohan Roy and other leaders who argued first, who requested the British authorities. Now they regulated. Sati was banned, infanticide was banned, widow remarriage was allowed. But the Hindus in large considered that this is the interference in their religion. Similar lines, the Muslim also thought that somewhere and somehow the British had started intervention in our religious issues, in our customs and traditions, and our religion is being polluted. So religious issues were also being highlighted in the newspapers. Delhi Urdu Akhbar, Sadiqul Akhbar, and many more newspapers. Manshur-e Muhammadi, it was a very important newspapers published during that period. And now they're criticizing the British government. Another very important and powerful resistance at this point of time started along with peasant movement, along with working class movement. It was the tribal revolts. Because government regulated the forest laws were passed. Now the tribals who are living in forest enjoys the customary and traditional rights for centuries and centuries. Forest was considered there as property. Forest land was considered as their land. Now the government regulated for the first time. Now this infuriated the tribals, and tribals, some of the practices, religious practices, their traditional practices were very brutal. Now the British government put ban on that. Now the tribals considered it as an intervention, as an interference. Now this is a tribal movement that built up. I'll give you many more examples from the pages of the newspapers. How Indians were being humiliated, how Indians were being discriminated, how Indians were being treated by the political master in the country. And that resulted, ये लोगों को, ये individually every Indian, as a tribeman, as a Hindu, as a Muslim, as a different sect, as a different gender, महसूस कर रहे थे, experiment कर रहे थे अपने life में. But there was no collective voice. There was no public opinion formulation. It was Urdu newspaper when they started writing extensively on the issues which humiliated the Indians. मंशूर मोहम्मदी फॉर एग्जाम्पल, ये एक अखबार है, ये कंटिन्यूअसली इस पे लिखता है, क्या नाम है कि ड्रेन ऑफ वेल्थ पे लिखता है, बार बार लिखता है, लोगों को समझाने की कोशिश करता है कि हाउ योर wealth, your resources, your country is being looted by the British. Similarly, we do find that एक मर्तबा क्या हुआ कि some Englishmen hunting and shooting spree पे जिम कॉर्बेट पार्क गए. जिम कॉर्बेट पार्क में अगर आप जाइए तो आज भी वहां किसी तरीके की शूटिंग एंड हंटिंग बैंड है. You were not allowed. Even those days, the government make a law that in that area, that was prohibited area, that was restricted area, आप शिकार नहीं कर सकते. Some Englishmen, some English officer started, उन्होंने शिकार खेलना शुरू कर दिया. अब जब शिकार खेलना शुरू किया तो वहां जो पोस्टमैन था, जो वहां वॉचमैन था, he protested, simply protested. Now one Englishman, उसने उसको वॉचमैन को शूट कर दिया. अब now there was no one to take this case to the थाना, पुलिस चौकी. Someone dare to take this matter. रिपोर्टिंग नहीं हो रही थी. Now at this point of time, in that area, some of the Urdu newspapers editors came to know about the happening. They published a now then we do find a case was registered. But once the case was registered, instead of punishing that man, now the entire British system started conspiring to save that gentleman or that man who committed the crime by shooting the watchman. Or it was only on the advocacy, repeatedly writing by the journalists in the newspapers, that man was arrested. Another very important development was that एक नवाब साहब एक अंग्रेज ऑफिसर के यहाँ पहुंचे. नाउ वो जूता और मोजा उन्होंने बाहर नहीं उतारा और अंदर चले गए. नाउ दिस फ्यूरिएटेड द इंग्लिश ऑफिसर. उसने फौरन हुक्म दिया कि जूता और मोजा उतारो और अपने दोनों को अपने सर पे रखो. दिस काइंड ऑफ ह्यूमिलिएशन व्हेन द इंडियंस मेट and passed through very turbulent, terrific phase. Now, when this was brought for the information to the people by writing in the newspapers, then only the people of the country came to know about the plight, the level of injustice, the level of humiliation. Another happening was that एक अंग्रेज ऑफिसर अपने सवारी से आ रहा था. दूसरे एक महाराजा थे, वो जा रहे थे, दोनों का आमना सामना हुआ. हालांकि वो घोड़े से उतर गए, उसको सैल्यूट भी किया, लेकिन that does not satisfy the English officer. How this gentleman riding on the horse was coming बहुत पहले इसको उतर जाना चाहिए था, उसका नजरिया ये था कि अगेन दैट मैन वाज ह्यूमिलिएटेड। इसी तरीके के सिमिलर अनदर काइंड ऑफ इंसिडेंट दैट हैड टेकन प्लेस somewhere in the Bareilly and Muradabad region, that some of the students, some of the children were playing. An English boy was there, he too was playing. Indian boy, उसको धक्का दे दिया उसने, pushed him, वो एक गड्ढे में गिर गया और वो डेथ कर जाता है. Now the children, the Indian boys or the children were arrested and punished, though they were not entitled. Juvenile case. Similar incident had happened when English children killed an Indian boy. A case was registered, but again we do find all this system started conspiring to save that children. And finally, that children was saved. The question is not that he was saved. The question was discrimination. Now, when this injustice, when this was brought into the light by the newspapers, by the journalists, then we do find the people started thinking in terms that it is very brutal. The injustice we met. Again, when the entire world was experimenting the idea of French Revolution, the idea of liberty, equality, and fraternity, now India is being deprived intentionally, willingly, the very liberty, very equality, very injustice they had known. So therefore, they started rising questions against the British discriminatory system, British system of justice. और अखबारों में ये छपने लगा. So this formulated a public opinion. And this formulation of the public opinion worked. And that worked with the annexation of Awadh in 1856. Annexation was considered to be the serious, gross violation of the political rules and regulations, because Awadh was allied and surrendered half of his territory to the British authorities whenever they demanded under the subsidiary alliance system, and he was very friendly to their demands. Every time he obliged. With the annexation, taxation system, land revenue system, the tariff policy that created havoc in India. Havoc in the sense, I'm using the word havoc in the sense that when the Indian wealth contributed to the GDP of the British, 2%, now with this GDP, with this growth rate, they achieved industrial revolution. After industrial revolution, India became a dumping ground for the manufactured British goods. Manchester, Lancashire, the cotton textile, whatever goods were produced or manufactured in factory, now that was dumped into India. And the British started taking away the natural resources, the minerals or the raw materials from India to feed the industry. So here India experienced deindustrialization. Again, in mass, people suffered. They experienced unemployment, poverty, impoverishment. But Dada Bhai Nauroji, when he studied, he come with an idea that drain of wealth is the evil of all evils, ill of all evils. Now these ideas were being published in the newspapers, Urdu newspapers. Later on, after foundation of the Indian National Congress, all the journalists or the newspapers took up the issue in a great manner and a very systematic manner. Now, this drain of wealth, this deindustrialization, this unemployment, the discriminatory tariff policy, the agrarian policy, discriminatory exploitative agrarian policies, all policies against the people of this country resisted. First of all, they resisted, they protested against the British authorities, and finally we do find that they revolted in 1857. Now, 1857, the eyewitness Maulvi Muhammad Baqir was eyewitness. Rafiq Zakaria, he is a political figure from Maharashtra, a very well-known writer. Perhaps you will be knowing Farid Zakaria, CNN, a great journalist, a very prominent journalist working in United States of America. उनके लड़के हैं रफीक ज़करिया. वो कहते हैं कि by the turn of the century, it becomes a powerful force in spreading national consciousness and political awareness. तो टर्न ऑफ द सेंचुरी कहते हैं. लेकिन मौलवी मोहम्मद बाकर ने जब लिखना शुरू किया, एक डिबेट है हिस्ट्री की, 1857 के डिबेट है, जो डिबेट वीडी सावरकर ने से शुरू होता है. जब उनकी किताब आई 18 वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस, his idea was the revolt of 1857 was the first national war of independence, जिसको आरसी मजूमदार ने रिफ्यूट किया कि neither it was first nor it was national nor it is war of independence. Some of the other historians came in with the new ideas, new sources, indigenous sources, Urdu sources, Persian sources, vernacular languages, sources available on the revolt of 1857. They defended that to say that it was a war of independence. It is true. When I was reading the Delhi Urdu Akhbar for my research, I come across that this newspaper often on every page while dealing with revolt of 1857, ये गदर नहीं कहता है, ये बगावत नहीं कह रहा है, ये सिंपल वर्ड यूज कर रहा है, दैट इज दी जंगे आजादी. जंगे आजादी, it means the editor, it means the people have an idea of Jange Azadi. Jange Azadi from the hands, from the clutches of the British domination. So to say, we can refute. R.C. Majumdar his statement and his argument is not valid. Because journalists were using the terminologies Jange Azadi. It was Jange Azadi because they were fearless, they were radical, they were the reformists. So was the case with the Bahadur Shah Zafar, Riaz-e-Noor, एक अखबार निकलता था, उनमें ताहिर महमूद एक राइटर है जिन्होंने अखबारात पे काम किया है. उन्होंने 1857 के जो अखबारात हैं, उन अखबारात के बारे में लिखा है कि इन अखबारात का कहीं ना कहीं बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट रोल है. इन्होंने बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले किया लोगों को मोबिलाइज करने में, रिवोल्ट को प्रोटेस्ट को पॉपुलराइज करने में, प्रोटेस्ट को इंटेंसिफाई करने में. इन अखबारात का बहुत ही अहम रोल है. उसके लिए मौलवी मोहम्मद बाकर ने क्या किया कि उन्होंने एज ए पॉलिसी मैटर ये किया कि अखबारात में उन्होंने इश्तिहार छापे, अखबार में उन्होंने फतवा छापा, अखबार में उन्होंने एलानिया छापा जिसको प्रोक्लेमेशंस कहते हैं. बहादुर शाह जफर का प्रोक्लेमेशन है, नाना साहब का प्रोक्लेमेशन है, बहुत मशहूर हजरत महल का प्रोक्लेमेशन है. ये सब उर्दू जबान में, और उर्दू जबान में इन लोगों ने इन अखबारात में छापा. और हजरत महल ने वादा किया, एड्रेसिंग ईच एंड एवरी सेक्शन ऑफ द सोसाइटी, शी ट्राई टू कन्विंस द मासेस दैट कि अगर हमारी गवर्नमेंट प्लीज कम फॉरवर्ड, सपोर्ट अस इन आवर एंडीवर टू फाइट अगेंस्ट द ब्रिटिश, द एलियन गवर्नमेंट, और हमारी गवर्नमेंट आ जाती है, हमारी हुकूमत रेस्टोर हो जाती है, तो हम किसानों के लिए ये करेंगे, हम बिजनेसमैन के लिए ये करेंगे, हम ट्रेडर्स के लिए ये करेंगे, हम ताल्लुकदार. these are the lines. बहादुर शाह जफर ने भी इन्हीं लाइंस पे काम किया कि how this resistance was, how this was carried out. With the formation of Indian National Congress, now the idea again कि देयर वाज नीड ऑफ पॉलिटिकल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, रिवोल्ट नाकाम हो चुका था, देयर वाज नीड, फॉर्चुनेटली इट वाज एवो ह्यूम जिसने अपने यूज के लिए इंडियन नेशनल कांग्रेस को कायम किया था, उसको इंडियंस ने हाईजैक किया और इसको एज ए प्लेटफॉर्म यूज किया और इसको इसके बाद और हिंदुस्तान की जंग आजादी की एक सिस्टमेटिक जंग शुरू होती है. Now, after that, you do find moderates dominated the scene. Most of the moderates were journalists. They started publishing newspapers, they started writing extensively, started writing on the vital issues. मैं आपको आपकी तवज्जो एक तरफ मबजूल करना चाहूंगा. I'll try to divert your attention towards a very important and vital issue, which is known as Ilbert Bill controversy. इल्बर्ट बिल कंट्रोवर्सी क्या था? सर इल्बर्ट बिल एक मेंबर थे, लॉ कमीशन के एक मेंबर थे. उन्होंने कहा कि नाउ इंडियन जजेस और यूरोपियन जजेस शुड बी ट्रीटेड इक्वली. अर्लियर इट वाज दैट यूरोपियन जजेस आर competent to try all kind of cases, but Indian judges were not entitled to try the Europeans for their crime and cruelty and criminality. This was a very discriminatory provision. सर इल्बर्ट ने क्या किया कि उन्होंने कहा दोनों को बराबर कर दिया. There was protest, there was very strong protest against this provision. Finally, the government, the British government, had to bow down before the protesters, and now the provision continued. This was an eye-opener. The Indian journalist, vernacular, Marathi ho, Punjabi ho, Gujarati ho, Hindi ho, English, Urdu, all the journalists के लिए eye-opener था. They started writing about how the Ilbert Bill, which was proposed Ilbert Bill, was withdrawn. This was only an attempt to give an equal treatment to the Indians, Indian judges. At par उनको रखना चाहते थे. And they too started writing, protesting, resisting the British imperialism. In this context, partition of Bengal पे आ जाइए. Partition of Bengal पे स्वदेशी मूवमेंट, अमृत बाजार पत्रिका forefront पे लिख रहा है. Many Urdu newspapers, by that time Urdu newspapers started writing on extensively on that. So now we do find एक पैगाम, आप उनका नाम जानते होंगे, मौलाना अबुल कलाम आजाद, a great politician, a great thinker, a great philosopher, educationist, first education minister of the independent India. उन्होंने अल हिलाल, अल बलाग, और जब इन दोनों अखबार को बंद कर दिया गया तो उन्होंने एक अखबार निकाला जिसका नाम था सिद्कुल लिसान, नहीं उसका नाम था पैगाम. पैगाम is a very important newspaper in this sense that he popularized through पैगाम, he popularized the idea of Khilafat movement. He was thoroughly, he wrote on Khilafat movement, Khilafat issues. Khilafat committee was formulated, and many ideas were so important that was mooted, that was popularized by Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, was that he argued, he supported message of peace, love, unity, humanism, equality, liberty, universal brotherhood. तो with this उनका अखबार जो था बहुत ही पॉपुलर अखबार हुआ, लोगों ने उसको पढ़ना शुरू किया, खिलाफत कमिटीज ने काम करना शुरू किया, खिलाफत कमिटीज स्टार्टेड creating political awareness, social awareness among the people. और सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट टेकअप जो इशू किया इन लोगों ने स्वदेशी मूवमेंट को इशू किया. इन्होंने कहा कि हम फॉरेन क्लॉथ, जो गांधी का आइडिया, गांधी जो तो लेटर आते हैं 1915 में आते हैं, लेकिन उससे पहले जो स्वदेशी मूवमेंट था, बाइकॉट मूवमेंट था, बाइकॉट के बाद कपड़ों को जला दिया था, फॉरेन क्लॉथ को। ही कम विद अ वेरी गुड आइडिया एंड ही रोट एन आर्टिकल इन पैगाम, और कहा कि ये जो हमारे कपड़े हैं जिनको हम जलाते हैं, बहिष्कार करते हैं, इन कपड़ों को जलाया नहीं जाना चाहिए। इट इज ट्रू, इट इज राइट कि हम स्वदेशी मूवमेंट को, देश की इंडस्ट्रीज को, इंडिजिनस इंडस्ट्रीज को प्रमोट करने के लिए हम इनको, हमें प्रमोट करना चाहिए, स्वदेशी को प्रमोट करना चाहिए, लेकिन सेम टाइम हमको इन कपड़ों को नहीं जलाना चाहिए, बल्कि इन कपड़ों को हमें उन मुल्कों में भेज देना चाहिए जहां जंग चल रही है, जंग से ग्रसित लोग जिनको कपड़ा नहीं है, जिनको खाना नहीं है, वहां हमें भेजना चाहिए। और फिर उस वक्त उन्होंने इमारत शरिया से कोलैबोरेशन करके, इमारत शरिया के जरिए अपने आइडियाज को पॉपुलराइज करने की कोशिश की थी। उसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में मौलाना मोहम्मद अली जौहर, मौलाना शौकत अली, ये दोनों भाई हमदर्द और हमदर्द अखबार निकालते हैं, कॉमरेड अखबार निकालते हैं, और इन अखबारात के जो मौजू हैं, जो मेन थीम है, वो हिंदू मुस्लिम यूनिटी है। हिंदू मुस्लिम यूनिटी की बहुत सख्त जरूरत थी, इसलिए कि 1857 की जब जंगे आजादी नाकाम हो गई, जब अंग्रेजों ने इसको कुचल दिया, उस वक्त उस वक्त उस वक्त उस वक्त उस वक्त डिवाइड एंड रूल की पॉलिसी उन्होंने अडॉप्ट की थी, एंड इस डिवाइड एंड रूल के पॉलिसी के तहत उन्होंने हिंदू और मुसलमानों को बांटना शुरू किया था। तो वट एवर द नेशनलिस्ट न्यूज़पेपर्स, तिलक का मेहरटा हो, तिलक और दूस केसरी हो, मौलाना आजाद का न्यूज़पेपर हो, मौलाना मोहम्मद अली जौहर का न्यूज़पेपर हो, एनी बेसेंट का न्यूज़पेपर हो, दादा भाई नौरोजी का न्यूज़पेपर हो, सुरेंद्रनाथ बनर्जी का न्यूज़पेपर हो, all these, एनी बेसेंट हो, सरोजनी नायडू हो, all these try to promote, propagate the idea of Hindu-Muslim unity, so that there should be politically they should be consolidated, opinion should be consolidated against the British. So in this way we do find how the journalists greatly contributed in making people united, convincing the people how to come together and to fight against the British. हसरत मोहानी का नाम आपने सुना होगा, a very famous politician and leading क्या कहेंगे उनको, leading poet of that period. Now he too promoted, अखबार निकाला इन्होंने, और अखबार के जरिए इन्होंने जो सबसे अहम बात की थी जो हिंदू मुस्लिम यूनिटी के लिए, उनका ये कहना था कि भाई हम दोनों मुश्तरका तहजीब की अलामत हैं, हम दोनों मुश्तरका तहजीब के मानने वाले हैं, लिहाजा मुश्तरका शेयर्ड कल्चर, शेयर्ड वैल्यूज को प्रमोट किया इन्होंने। और इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में उन्होंने लॉर्ड कृष्णा के तो बहुत एडमायरर थे, उन्होंने उनको एडमायर करते हुए बहुत सारी नज़में लिखी जो हिंदू मुस्लिम यूनिटी के लिए बहुत ही अहम साबित हुई उसमें। तो इस तरीके से हम देखते हैं कि ये तमाम शोरा, तमाम जर्नलिस्ट किस तरीके से मिल करके इन्होंने यूनाइटेडली काम किया, वर्क किया। इन दिस वे थ्रू आउट दिस पीरियड जो कुछ भी हुआ, साइमन कमीशन आया हो, उसके बाद से खिलाफत नॉन कॉपरेशन मूवमेंट हो, उसके बाद से सिविल डिसोबीडियंस मूवमेंट है, क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट है, ऑल द डेवलपमेंट्स वर रिपोर्टेड बाय द जर्नलिस्ट in their newspapers to formulate the opinion, to create a public opinion against the British, to consolidate their opinion. In this context, lastly, I can remind you the name of Raja Mahendra Pratap. He was a great man, very radical, not convinced with the idea of the Gandhi's policies of non-violence. He believed in the violent overthrow of the British rule. He was the man who established an exile government in Afghanistan, where he himself declared as a president. Ubaidullah Sindhi was declared as home minister. Barkatullah Bhopali was declared as the prime minister. And there were many more. A whole government was created in exile. He too was a journalist. Prem, उनका एक अखबार निकलता था. He tried to preach the message of peace and love. ढंढोरा, जिसके जरिए उन्होंने लोगों को अवेयर करने की कोशिश की. उर्दू के बहुत सारे जर्नलिस्ट इन अखबारों में लिखते थे. सिमिलरली लाला हरदयाल, गदर मूवमेंट. तो गदर नाम का एक अखबार निकलता था, उसमें मजामीन छपते थे. ये तमाम एंटी ब्रिटिश सेंटिमेंट को अराउज करने के लिए, सोशल पॉलिटिकल अवेयरनेस क्रिएट करने के लिए, अराउज करने के लिए इन तमाम अखबारात में a large number of newspapers, उर्दू न्यूज़पेपर्स. वर्नाकुलर न्यूज़पेपर की बात कीजिए तो दैट इज एक लेक्चर में बहुत मुश्किल है. इवन उर्दू न्यूज़पेपर्स बहुत मुश्किल. नाउ फाइनली in 1947, because of these protests, because of the resistance that was put forth by the journalists, vernacular journalists of the vernacular languages, particular in general, and in particular the Urdu journalists, there was the trend change when Muslim leagues, politics, the separatism, the communalism came. The situation changed. But anyhow, there were large number of newspapers to support the independence of India and oppose the partition. Thank you very much for listening, for bearing with me patiently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for enlightening us. Dear participant, you were listening to Professor Parwez Nazir's lectures on Urdu journalism and its role in Indian independence movement. And he discussed journalism serve as a unique and invaluable source for constructing the history of any era, economic history, political history, social history in general, and particularly the public opinion, to constructing public opinion. He also discussed the role of Urdu newspaper in shaping public opinion. Urdu newspaper in the 19th century function and agents of change, providing platform for diverse voices and perspectives. But sir, I have a not question but query.
Yes.
What challenges the scholars or researchers while reading newspapers for constructing history can face? उनको कौन सी प्रॉब्लम आ सकती है कि जो न्यूज़पेपर को कंसल्ट करते वक्त एज अ सोर्स?
Very good question. And I expect this question from the students, research scholars. But unfortunately,
have you any questions? Please drop your question in box or unmute yourself to ask the question.
Dr. Zaul Haq asked a question, a very important, very interesting question. What challenges a research scholar has to face while dealing the newspapers, working on the newspapers, working on the print media? Many challenges. Because dealing with a particular theme, any theme, for example, if you are working on Tipu Sultan, books are available, documents are available, very limited. But so far, if you are working or dealing with the newspapers, plethora, large number of newspapers, आप उसको किसको पढ़ें? Not available in National Archives alone. State archives, you have to visit state archives. We have to visit National Archives. Many state archives में आप जाएंगे तब जाकर के आप कलेक्ट कर पाएंगे डाटा. The collection of the data from the newspaper is difficult in the sense that it is not available. All kind of data are not available at one place. Therefore, you have to visit different places. Secondly, the newspapers, whatever it is available, it is brittle. Now there are modern techniques, they preserve कर दिया है उन्होंने. लेकिन जब बहुत ही पुराना, बहुत ही फरसुदा, बहुत ही खस्ता हाल जब पेजेस को आप पढ़ेंगे तो आपको पढ़ने का मन नहीं करेगा. इट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू रीड दी खस्ता हाल न्यूज़पेपर्स. नॉट अट्रैक्टेड, थोड़ी देर पढ़ेंगे थक जाएंगे. लिहाजा दिस इज अनदर चैलेंज. बट दिस चैलेंज, देयर इज अनदर चैलेंज कि आप कितनी जगह फाइनेंशियल भी अब आ गया है कि भाई आप कहाँ कहाँ जाएंगे. आसफिया लाइब्रेरी जाएंगे, लखनऊ जाएंगे, कलकत्ता जाएंगे, भोपाल जाएंगे. देयर वर सो मेनी ब्रांचेस ऑफ नेशनल आर्काइव्स के. तो बट वन इन दीज चैलेंजेस तो आते रहेंगे. फाइनेंसेस के भी आपको आएंगे बिकॉज यू विल नॉट बी अलाउड टू फोटोग्राफ. फिर इनको जीरोक्स करना है, उनको जीरोक्स फिर कैसे करना है. अगेन इट इज वेरी टाइम टेकिंग. तो नाउ यू आर सपोज टू बी वेरी अलर्ट. नेशनल आर्काइव्स ऑफ इंडिया ने अपने तमाम डॉक्यूमेंट्स को डिजिटलाइज कर दिया है. And from time to time they used to upload their digitalized materials on the site. Again आप उसको डाउनलोड नहीं कर सकते हैं. तो मोस्टली लड़का क्या करता है कि उन डॉक्यूमेंट्स को स्कैन करते चला जाता है on their mobile. तो there is a challenge and you can overcome this challenge in this way. Second important thing is कि आप नेशनल आर्काइव में जाइए, बैठिए, 10 दिन का प्लान बनाइए. 10 दिन में आपको 10-10 पेज वो करने के लिए जीरोक्स मौका देंगे. यू विल बी एबल टू ब्रिंग 100 and 150 pages. This is another in the way to reach out the challenge. And but you have to do it. There another very important thing to deal with these documents. ये अखबारात की रिपोर्टिंग जो है, डे टू डे रिपोर्टिंग यू विल फाइंड इन दी होम डिपार्टमेंट्स की फाइल में, जिसको गवर्नमेंट ने प्रिजर्व किया हुआ है नेशनल आर्काइव्स में. पॉलिटिकल डिपार्टमेंट्स, फॉरेन डिपार्टमेंट्स की फाइल में प्रिजर्व है. होम डिपार्टमेंट में है, पुलिस डिपार्टमेंट में है. कि पुलिस की रिकॉर्ड और होम डिपार्टमेंट की रिकॉर्ड तो जो है ये न्यूज़पेपर में क्या छप रहा है उन्हीं अखबार को की कटिंग से और लिख करके रिपोर्टिंग वो ले जा करके आला हुक्काम तक पहुंचाते हैं. तो दीज आर इन गुड शेप. तो एटलीस्ट आप इनको देख करके जिस अखबार पे काम करते, फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आप बिजनौर के मदीना अखबार पे काम करते हैं तो अब तो धीरे धीरे किताबें आ रही हैं. पीटर रॉब नाम है या समथिंग रॉब करके है, उसने बिजनौर पे मदीना अखबार पे बहुत अच्छा काम किया है. एक ब्रिटिश रिसर्च स्कॉलर थी. तो इस तरीके से आप इन किताबों, अब बहुत सारी किताबें अब आ गई हैं इंग्लिश में. इफ यू आर नॉट नोइंग उर्दू तो अब इंग्लिश में बहुत सारी किताबें उर्दू प्रिंट मीडिया से डील करते हुए आ गई हैं, जिनको आप पढ़ सकते हैं, एक आइडिया फॉर्मुलेट कर सकते हैं. लेकिन यू हैव टू लर्न उर्दू. उर्दू सीखना एक बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है, लेकिन उर्दू सीखना बहुत आसान है. while living in अलीगढ़ मुस्लिम यूनिवर्सिटी, मानू, जामिया मिलिया इस्लामिया, JNU, DU, it is very easy to learn. In comparison to Persian, it is very easy to learn. You can learn and overcome that challenge, and you can use the National Archive and all the documents pertaining with this क्या कहेंगे, this literature, rebel literature.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Dear participant, have you any question? Please unmute yourself and ask your question or drop your question in the message box. Anyone?
I don't think there is no question.
Yes.
Ziaul Haq, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interact with the students, research scholars. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.